Welcome once again to the Visionary Show. My partner is not with me today, but he'll be able to join us next time. My name is Jen Crow. I'm the branding lead of Authority Fusion, and my partner is Mohan Ananda, who will be joining us next time. He's a serial entrepreneur and he's done a lot of things. Great individual, but he can't join us today. But we are very lucky because we have today in our studio a formidable woman, actually human being, because I cannot contain her into just a woman because I've met her and I'm not just impressed. I was like, I met a role model. Here with us today is Emily Chang. Hi, Emily. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me, Jen.
Yes. So for our audience, I know a little bit about you. I've read up about you. I've read your book. For our audience, can you tell us more a little bit about you?
Sure. I'm somebody who wants to live with a lot of intention and leave the world better than I found it. The world is a very big place, so I wrote a book called The Spare Room. My core idea is that of leaving a social legacy. So legacy is leaving something impactful and positive, but social defines the space in which we want to have that impact. For our family, that was our spare room, and we were able to take care of, to date, 17 babies, young people who have been orphaned, abused, or marginalized. And in fact, one of those kids who lived with us for a year is now grown up, and he and his wife have moved back into my home, and now I'm sharing a whole house, not just a room.
How did it come about? How did it start for you?
Started when I was still an undergraduate in upstate New York. I pulled up to a red light on a sleety evening, and I saw a little girl sitting on the side of the street. And you know, I didn't introduce my work career. I would say over the last 26 years, I've had some incredible jobs with big companies like Starbucks, Procter Gamble, Intercontinental Hotels, and Apple. They've taken me to different places like Guangzhou, China, Shanghai, China, Arkansas, Cincinnati, Cupertino, and wherever we have ended up, we have found children in need. So in some ways, you know, I think what's more important in my own identity is the legacy that I get to leave with the people that I come in contact with. In many ways, I think my job, which I've been very grateful for, has enabled me, both financially, but also in putting me in all these different places around the world to have that impact.
So it's double entendre, huh? And during your undergrad, it was a stoplight. You pulled up to a stoplight. It's red. And we associate, you know, in life, we associate red as like something negative or like it's hindering our progress or something. But in your case, you figured out something what you call social legacy.
I think so, but it wasn't right away. I think that's something important to know, that it's not like people have it all together. Somebody reached out to me just on LinkedIn and said, hey, can I have time with you? And I've had to become a lot more intentional about who I reach out to. I am one of the people who responds to everybody who writes to me, because I think if somebody younger is interested, I'm not going to ignore them. However, I don't have time to meet with everybody. So I've had to think about, how do I have as much impact as I can and address the questions and the interests of people who are up and coming in their career, professionals and parents, in a way that honors their curiosity and the fact that they chose to reach out to me, but at the same time, recognize that, you know, one person only has so much time. When I first met Leah, I didn't immediately have this moment of, oh, this must be my social legacy. No, of course not. In fact, it took many more kids before I started to have this reflection with my husband that said, it seems like this keeps happening over and over again. So maybe there's something here. That's where intention jumped in, and we said, this seems to be something that continues to intersect with our lives, so we are going to make the decision as a couple and then later as a family with my daughter to always say yes. And in the same way, I've had different intersections with my career where opportunities have opened up and I've said yes. So please don't take away, anybody who's listening, that you immediately know or you're immediately on this trajectory or on a glide path to success. I think the only thing you have to have are two things. One is curiosity to learn more about opportunities, and then courage to take that first step.
I'm curious about the practical aspects of it. So there's a spare room. You let some people into your home. How's the dynamics with your kid, with your husband, and with your busy life? You're a CEO right now, and you've worked with PNG, IHG. So these jobs took up a lot of your time. But how do you manage? How do you balance that? Oh, that's a nice.
Well, the first
teacup.
thing is my husband has stayed home for many years and been the primary caregiver for those kids. We would absolutely not have been able to take care of all those kids without him being in the primary role. Many of the kids had special needs, and so he was driving, for instance, Teo, he had a medical appointment every single day of the week. And so he was really the heart of this caretaking. I think for my daughter, how was it? She has grown up with elder, younger, male, female siblings, and I think it's given her a different view of life. One, even though she is an only child by birth, she's lived with a lot of siblings, and that's given her a different worldview. And two, it's instilled in her, this isn't why we did it, but I'm very grateful it happened, instilled in her a deep sense of gratitude, because she has seen how other children have grown up, and she understands and doesn't take for granted all the things that she has. And it's not something we've ever had to tell her. In fact, if anything, she veers too much to the other end. Sometimes I've seen that Lainey will struggle with something and she'll almost kick herself and say, I shouldn't be struggling with this. Other kids have it so much harder. And I have to remind her, everybody's going through their own experience, and tough moments don't have to be dramatically overwhelming for them to be tough. We can acknowledge that they're difficult, and we can give ourselves a little bit of grace to recognize that we have to get through this moment. And if we don't recognize that, we don't ask for help, and then we can actually start to spiral downward.
You know, the filmmaker in me, I'm just starting to do filmmaking, recording videos and editing them. The filmmaker in me wanted to just go in your house and become invisible and just watch how you guys do it, because it's just so inspiring. And Doug and I, we live with a dog, and sometimes I can't imagine having another a temp for, let's say, 3 months that I need to take to the hospital. Who pays for the medical expenses?
We have also worked with some nonprofits in the past, and we come alongside and partner with them where we give the care and sometimes they cover the medical. It just depends. I think money is something that we hold so esteemed in our lives, and certainly it's important, and it's a lot easier to say this when you have it.
Yes.
It's a very expensive lifestyle to be poor in this world, but it is also not the only thing. You know, something we've learned is living with a village, with a community who will help us take care of somebody, who will pick up my daughter if we're at a medical appointment with one of our kids. You know, I think that community and the love and the care, that is equally, if not more important for us to be able to successfully take care of these kids.
Have you, or has any one of you become attached with anyone?
Every single one of them, absolutely.
But how do you do it? How do you just how long do they stay in your house, and where do they go after they leave your house?
Excuse me, I just caught a cold yesterday. Okay, back in. I think it's always difficult when we get attached to somebody, but I think the biggest perspective that we need to keep in mind is we're only here for a little while. There's this beautiful Balinese saying, 100 years, all new people. Even with our spare room kids, we're only here for a small part of their journey. And our job is to equip them as much as we can for the next leg. And it's informed the way that I parent my own birth daughter, which is she's only here with me for 17 years, and then she's going to college. I think there's a statistic that says your children are with you for the first 17 years before university. It's something like 90% of their entire life's time that they spend with you. That's why it's so important to take every single moment that we have with them, because when they move on to university, our lives change and our interactions are going to change dramatically.
Do you have any future plans on how to make this bigger? I know the book should help with that, but something you haven't shared to us.
Well, we're on a podcast now. There are a lot of ideas on how to amplify the idea. And it is not for me to become better known or to sell more books. It is really to have a bigger impact. And that goes back to your very first question. I'm open to any way, even when they're uncomfortable for me, to try and share the idea, because when I have seen such great response and sort of life-changing response. I'm going to pull up kind of spontaneously, so give me a second. I received this text the other day, and I did get permission to share it. It really changed and motivated me This person who I didn't know very well wrote me and said, I read your book. It took me a minute because of deadlines, but once I opened it, I couldn't put it down. I read it in one sitting and completely abandoned everything else I had planned to finish. I can't tell you how perfect it was for me to read at this time. My biggest takeaway was how scarce I have been with my mindset. My biggest takeaway was how scarce I have been with my mindset and what resources I have at hand. I've even talked to my therapist about the book to help me process it, LOL. I can talk on and on, but truly thank you for giving me this book. It is a gift. These are the reasons why I want to amplify. And so I'm looking at a podcast that I've started, that I will be starting. I've already picked up and started a TikTok, which I'll tell you is very uncomfortable. You know, when I look at TikTok, I see like a lot of great humor. I know. And young people showing you how to contour their face, right? But then actually that's exactly the point, Jen. I started searching female leaders talking about purpose and professionalism, female executives talking about parenting and professionalism, and I didn't find a lot of people. And then you add in AAPI, or women of color, and there are very, very few senior level executives. So that actually motivated me, and I said, okay, I am going to go on TikTok, and I am going to use this platform that is really engaging and see if I can start talking about things that matter and maybe answer some people's questions.
I think there's something noble about doing it for somebody who's not blood related to you at all.
Well,
That's why people are drawn to it's not just a concept, you know, it's supposed to be a movement.
yes, exactly. And you know, this doesn't say you should open your spare room to somebody in need. Mm-hmm. It's a construct that says, you know, I talked about social legacy. It's the intersection of two things. It's your offer, that unique combination of who you are, your personality,
Exactly.
your life experiences, what you're good at. And then it's the intersection of that with what I called your offense, because there's so many things in the world that you can focus on, that you can try to address. But for everybody, there's that one thing that really speaks to you, that keeps you awake at night, that you wake up thinking about sometimes, that you think that should be better. It's like when I drove by Leah. I couldn't keep driving, even though I was tired and it was cold and I was hungry. There is something that will stop you in your tracks. When you identify what that thing is, that's your offense. So if you find your offer and your fence, you're going to find your own social legacy. That's one of the biggest motivations to write the book, to start a podcast, to start the TikTok, because I know that people are hungering to live lives that are richer and deeper and more meaningful. They either know their offer, they know who they are, but they're not sure where to point it, or they know the thing they want to address, but they think, what can I do? I'm just one person. So I think, you know, hopefully when you read the book, it touches you like the person who I read their text, that they think, oh, I've realized something and I'm going to do something about it.
I wonder how much of a risque person you are. Currently, you're a CEO of VML, right? And I wonder, would you rather just focus on your social legacy and leave your job, or keep doing it at the same time until maybe retirement? Because something like this is, you know, it would need your full attention, I guess, in the future once it grows bigger.
Well, you know, I was pre-med when I was younger because I was so called to taking care of children, especially those who were vulnerable. I had an incident in a children's hospital where I was volunteering, and I just saw a young child not treated very well by a doctor who probably didn't have bad intentions but was just too busy. And that really made me think, I want to be exactly that. I want to be a pediatric oncologist, and I'm going to do it better. And it turns out I don't have the emotional distance. Obviously, I'm bringing all these kids home. I started working in pediatric intensive care. I was doing a lot of things that made me realize I don't have that emotional distance. And actually, perhaps that doctor had a distance that was necessary for him to do his job well. So my key learn is your passion doesn't have to only be your career. Do I love my career? Absolutely. But do I also love taking care of children? Absolutely. And for some people whose stories I've included in the book, their job and their social legacy are the same. For me, they have been separate. So my spare room was something I didn't even talk about until really I worked at Intercontinental Hotels Group. And then it started to come together in a little bit more of a fluid way.
Okay, so, wow. Following your career fulfills, you know, your, of course, our desire for self-fulfillment, but following a social legacy at the same time is a wonderful thing because it nourishes your soul. Now, can you tell us a story that I know there's a lot, but if you can pick just one that really ripped through your heart, that just that situation alone, you can't imagine how a young person goes through that. Yeah, if you could share that story to our audience, to me and to our audience.
Maybe I'll tell you about the most recent kid, and he's not even in the book. His name is Wayne, and like Teo, who I wrote a lot about because he lived with us for the longest, on and off for 5 years, Wayne also had hydrocephalus, and this is where your cerebrospinal fluid can go up into your head, but it can't come back down, and so the soft baby's skull stretches. Now, while Teo came to us at about 18 months old, Wayne was already 4 years old. He was extremely emaciated, and this is not because anybody was intentionally trying to harm the child. People don't know how to care for a baby with hydrocephalus. He'd never developed neurologically, so he didn't know how to articulate what he needed. He couldn't even move his limbs. You know that moment when a baby sort of magically floats their arm up and they kind of go, oh, I'm making that happen. He was 4 years old and didn't understand how to have even gross motor control. He couldn't verbalize anything, and so he laid on his head because he had a very big head all the time. He was already 4 years old, so the back of his head was completely flat. This baby, they were trying to feed, but have you tried to eat lying flat on your back? You're choking constantly. You can't eat, you can't drink. So this baby came to us really undernourished. And I say baby, but he was already 4. He was like a newborn. And over that period, he had the sweetest little face, and he had the cutest little giggle, and he could only grunt. But I'll tell you something amazing. I've shared a couple of video clips when I do talks about Wayne, because the first video is in November. I think we brought him home late summer. In November, I had a video I was taking of my husband trying to teach him how to hold a chip. And you would put the chip in his hand and it would just fall. And you would put the chip in his hand. He didn't know how to pinch his fingers together. In December, we would put a little piece of bread in his hand and he could kind of hold it. So that was working, but he couldn't get the hand to his mouth. And you would see his little tongue going like he was hungry, and he knew the point of this was to get the food into his mouth, and he couldn't do it. But by January, I caught it on video because it happened. My husband was, I think he was at church with my daughter, and so I was home alone with Wayne, and I'd made his favorite, which is a very greasy, very delicious rosemary focaccia. And I cut it in little pieces, and I put it on his lap, and I just left him, and then I stepped back with a video, and you saw him reach down. He picked up a piece and put it in his mouth, and he was so proud. Like the whole body was wiggling. Do you know, it is hard to bring kids into your house. It takes a lot of extra time, a lot of extra care. Does some of that attention divert from my daughter? For sure. Does it make our lives more stressed? Absolutely. But the richness and the fulfillment you get from watching Wayne put that piece of focaccia in his mouth is worth tenfold. Your life is so much richer, and there is this magic when you open your life to social legacy. The time expands. Your capabilities expand. You find you're able to, and in fact you want to do things you never would have thought you would want to do. If you asked me as a college kid, would you bring a teenage prostitute into your home? I'd be like, are you crazy? I'm pre-med. That was the first girl, Leah. She was essentially selling her body to stay alive on the streets when I met her, and I brought her into my home, my apartment. And you know, she was really a little aggressive, understandably. I remember she came into my apartment very suspicious, and rightfully so. She didn't know me. And it was a one-bedroom. It wasn't even a one-bedroom. It was a one-room studio. And she looked around. She said, spare room? What spare room? I had a mattress on the floor. I was just a poor college kid. But you can do things that you can't possibly imagine are possible if you try.
I want to go back to that. Like, when's that point? How God, because you know, I myself would want to do something like that, but every time I think of the practical aspects of it, not financial. I'm good with financial. I don't have a lot of money, but I'm willing to of course, do what it takes, right? But the practical aspects of it, like, can my heart take it? Can I really devote this much time? So I want to know, what's the thought process? What's the heart process for that? How did it come to you? When did it come to you when you can say, oh my gosh, I can do more. I can do more.
Yes. The first time, I just didn't know. I couldn't leave that girl sitting on the street, beaten up. The second time, when she moved to a foster family and suggested this other girl she met on the street move in with me, I just said yes, because of course I've just done this once. And over the years, we just said yes. I think it was the time when Teo moved out. Teo, the first boy with hydrocephalus. I was so attached to him. He called me mama. He was part of our family. We had already made the decision and had gone through the process and spent the money, by the way, to adopt him. And then he ended up, long story, read the book, with a different family. And I was just, it was almost like waterworks. I could not stop crying. I could not stop. I would go to work and cry. And I remember my boss was wonderful. He asked me, do you want to go home? And I said, no, I don't. I can't. I have to work. He said, okay, what do we do when you start crying in the meeting? I said, just ignore me. And he was this very empathetic man. So I remember something happened in a meeting and I just started to tear up and everybody looked at me. He goes, just ignore her. Keep working. And people looked at him like he was heartless. But he understood me and he understood what I needed. It was that night I went home and I was like, I can't stop crying. I don't know. Do I need to take a leave? And my daughter Lainey looked at me and she said, Mom, why is this so hard for you? I said, it's like there's a hole in our family. How is this not hard for you? And she said, well, you know, her favorite article of clothing was a pair of jeggings, these stretchy leggings that look like jeans. She said, our family's like jeggings. It's like we stretch and fill kids, and then when they leave, we just go back to being jeggings. And somehow that phrase changed it for me. Suddenly I thought, you're right, we're stretching to fill these kids, and actually when they go into somewhere better, we're back to our family, and we are stretchy, we're adaptable. Not every family can do that.
Adaptability.
Yeah.
So you had that desire to adopt that child. Was there ever a child, a teenager, who said, can you adopt me?
No, but there was one kid who's also not in the book who wanted to stay with us indefinitely. And it wasn't the right thing for him.
Well,
I think
with focaccia, do you bake? Are you the one baking the focaccia? If that's the case, I'd like to be adopted. Emily.
I do like to cook. I didn't cook as much in China. I had a very busy job, and in China you have the luxury of having a housekeeper who can do a lot of things, and that was very lovely. And that was also why this other kid didn't want to leave. He thought this is a very good life. But our job isn't to make people comfortable, right? Our job is to make their lives better as much as we can. And that is withholding judgment. I don't know what's better, but I know what I can do to arm you to be more successful and thrive in your own life.
Not to make them comfortable, I'd quote you on this, but to make their lives better. Can you expound on that?
Well, it's easy to, for instance, with Teo in the beginning, it's easy to let him sit. It's easy to feed him. That's comfortable for him. He can sit, and he was reclined with his big head, and he would open his mouth, and I would feed him. But that's not better for him. It's better if he can learn to feed himself, because you don't know if you can take him forever. You don't know if you can adopt him. So what you have to do is help them help themselves. You have to set them up to thrive no matter where they end up in the world. Being able to feed yourself is better than not being able to feed yourself. So it was constantly putting the spoon in his mouth, in his hand, and he would drop it. Putting the spoon in his hand, and he would drop it. And in fact, there was a family, I don't get credit for this. Elisabetta gets credit. She was a woman who was considering adopting him, so we moved him into her house. And one day, she sent me a photo of Teo holding a plastic IKEA spoon. It was taped to his hand. And I was like, oh my gosh, is that cruel? And then I thought about it. It's not hurting him. She texted back. I said, is he okay? She texted back, he can feed himself. He just doesn't want to. And she was right. She taped the spoon to his hand, and then he started feeding himself. And he learned the joy of that feeling of accomplishment.
I'm learning so much from you, but I can't share it in public because it's so personal. I'll tell you offline. So you help them at their most vulnerable time, but you don't enable them to not help themselves. You teach them to help themselves.
Yeah,
eventually.
I'll tell you a vulnerable story. This one really impacted me. You know, in the story, I write a story about Devin, who is a child bride. We had another child bride stay with us, and I had reached out to her and said, how do you feel about me sharing your story? I could either do it anonymously, or I can do it with your name, and there's a combination of that in the book. And she said, How could you? I don't want you to tell my story. In fact, I don't have good memories living with you. I was stunned. I was stunned because she left a bad situation. We paid for her to go to a place to get education. I don't want to share too much about who she is or where she is. We helped her move into a new career. When I reached out to her, she was remarried with multiple children and looked like she was thriving. But her impression of me was negative. I really struggled with it for weeks. I remember talking to my husband and being like, did we do something? What happened? And I think, sometimes you're pushing people into uncomfortable places. Sometimes they just have terrible memories of a certain chapter in their life. Maybe they ascribe it to you. And maybe there is something that I did that really upset her. I didn't know. But I still think that's our job as humans, is to help other people. And if they don't thank you for it, that's not the point of why you help them to begin with.
Not to instigate, but have you figured out, has she ever shared exactly what made her feel that way?
Not entirely. So I it didn't seem like a conversation she wanted to have. So that goes back to, how do you help people?
So
I will live with not knowing.
That makes your review 4.8. Hang on, I need to catch my breath. That was it's a very timely interview. If you knew what Doug and I have been discussing this past weekend. Whew. Wow, we need to talk a separate time. Okay, so in line with the title of the show, the Visionary Show, we can tell, of course, social legacy. I've never heard anyone really advocate for something. Like you said, you go to TikTok, there's nothing like that, right? So you're a true visionary. How does your role, as a global leader, help in you doing this kind of legacy?
Well, I think the job has put me in different places around the world, and that is a real blessing, because that's where I get to meet these kids who need a place, and everyone has found us through a different means. I also get to bring a voice to the workplace that you don't normally hear. I remember being at IHG, and I had mentioned earlier in this recording that was when I really claimed this is an intention, and this is a way that our family will choose to live. I'll tell you, one day my husband and daughter were coming by the office to pick me up because we were going to one of my daughter's favorite restaurants, Morton's, and it's right on the Bund, and my office was right on the Bund.
Italian restaurant.
It's a steak place. It's not, by far, it's not the best place in Shanghai, but that was her favorite, right? And Teo loved steak, and my husband is an absolute carnivore. So they were really happy. They came by the office. I wasn't quite ready, so I said, why don't you come upstairs? My husband pushed a stroller that was reclined because Teo couldn't put his head up for long periods. He'd already had the shunt installed and had multiple surgeries, but he was, he looked different than most people look with the size of his head, and his eyes were still unable to blink. My daughter came up, and it was like a hush fell over the floor. I sat in the corner office, and my team was sort of across the floor, and on both sides of those hallways, people started turning their head, because even in developed countries, you don't see children with hydrocephalus very often, and especially not in China. People started to come out of their office, and they were saying, "Can we see him? Is this your son?" And so we put him on the ground because he could kind of do this little army crawl at that point. And he crawled into my lap and turned his head up on his back and looked up at me and grabbed my hair and just giggled. And I looked up from the floor, and I saw these expressions that I'd never seen on any of my team's faces. It's like the CEO, I was CCO at the time, it's like the title washed away. It's like the corner office washed away, and they just saw a mom who cares about her child. And it made me realize this is really important, to integrate your work in your life. What you're doing for social legacy, you should bring in the workplace. And that has stayed with people. Somebody texted me on International Women's Day just recently and said, I still remember that day, and you showed me that leaders can be real. So I think my job has been really important because it's enabled me to connect with people and show them a different brand of leadership that is perhaps vulnerable and authentic and sometimes fails.
How are you not crying telling all these stories? Wow.
I cried for a long time about Teo until the jeggings.
So you're all cried out. You're all cried out. Good for you.
Sometimes. There's still moments.
Well, I won't keep you that long anymore. That was a great conversation. I just want you to share more about the Spare Room, your book, and promote this noble effort. I don't know. I can't say it's a concept because it is not.
Well, I would
It is.
hope, I'm going to give you credit. You said earlier, Jen, you want it to be a movement. That's what I would love.
It is a movement. It
I
should
would
be.
love it. Like that idea, you go to a Starbucks, pay it forward. Everybody knows what pay it forward means. Do you know who coined the phrase? Probably not. That's what I would love one day. People just start talking about what's your spare room. They don't have to know me or remember me, but if the idea of a spare room becomes a movement, that is a success and something that I would die feeling so happy about. So you can find me on social-legacy.com, a website. You can find me on socials at spareroom.emilychang. And I'm on LinkedIn, Emily Chang 8621. And you can buy the book anywhere, Amazon.
Hang on, you're on TikTok too. Don't forget.
Oh yeah, same thing, socials, spareroom.emilychang. Same handle.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Emily, for the time you spared for me and for us, for our audience. It's been just lovely. It can tug in your heart, that feeling that what am I doing with my life? You can feel it. There's a hole that you need to sort of heal or something. I just wish we could talk again another time offline. Guys, we're not involving you, but I had a great time. I have been heavily touched, and I really want to get to know you more as a person, Emily. There's so much there I want to know more about.
Thank you.
So
Well, I love the idea of visionaries, right? We should have a bigger vision for our lives. And here's the thing, if you can't articulate what your vision is for your life, then what are you doing today?
Exactly.
Are you only existing?
Right? Well,
It
you're
really
drifting.
is binary. So go create your vision and live the biggest life you can.
Yeah, create your vision. Create that spare room in your life to make other people's lives better. And there you have it for today's episode. We'll see you again next time with Mohan Ananda. Have a great day, everyone.